You did hello. JACOBS, yeah. Yep.
Good afternoon. My name is James Hampson. I'm the Executive Vice President of our Program Delivery arm within JACOBS in Europe. And with me today, we have...
Hi, I'm Helen Reeves. I'm a Director and Capability Lead for Geoscience and Engineering Geology in Europe. Nice to meet you all.
And so Helen and I work for a business called JACOBS, which you can trace all the way back to the 1950s in America. Within Europe, there's about 10,000 people within JACOBS, predominantly UK-based, but also in Sweden, Germany, throughout continental Europe. It covers pretty much most aspects of program delivery and project delivery from our major projects arm, which is where I'm from, through our water, environment, geotech, and seismic analysis work, through to transportation, infrastructure, energy and power, advanced facilities. So we cover pretty much most, and the largest project delivery company in the world. So, a little bit about myself. I've been with the business for 34 years from when I was at school as an apprentice. So it's an organization that looks after their people, I would say, all the way through to senior vice president around the globe. Within the nuclear side, I spent quite a few years at Sellafield on the decommissioning arm, and also down at Hinkley with the new power station we're building. Lastly, it's also the main focus, which is probably what I'll talk a little bit more about here, is on the SMRs and our approach to how we will look to address the challenges associated with the delivery of the SMRs. And Helen?
So I'm a bit more of a newbie to JACOBS, but very much joined it for the same reasons, the culture. I had 18 years before joining JACOBS as a science director for engineering, geology and infrastructure, a research organisation in the UK called the British Geological Survey. As part of my work at JACOBS, I'm involved with a lot of site and ground characterisation, particularly working a lot in more recent years on new build nuclear programmes, Sizewell, Bradwell, both around ground characterisation, but also seismic hazard analysis. So nice to meet you all.
Nice to be here. So, what we're going to talk about in the first place is about the programmatic approach and some of the advantages, particularly in the SMR market, of what opportunities bring associated with that. Then we'll go through some of the examples of our knowledge on the major programs and how it affects the nuclear side of the infrastructure programs. So I'll start off. The slide itself, and you'll see along this talk, there's one major theme in what I'm about to talk about today, and that is about the lessons from other industries and what can be brought to the nuclear side of things. So what we've got on the left-hand side is when we were sort of 15 years ago analysing these major programs, and there's lots of press about large programs being delayed or over budget. When we analyse these, a lot of it is dealt back to how we actually set the program up in the beginning. And the lessons here, I was fortunately invited to a Jaguar's facility in Birmingham in the UK, where they build the XF. And the thing that we learned from Jaguar in their production mentality, which they got from Tata and previously Ford and Toyota, was about the operationalizing of lessons. And if you gain a lesson, if you don't change a process of how you do your day job, you will repeat the lesson. So some of the things we see in industry at the moment, we see a lot of lessons identified, but we don't see lessons learned. And so what we've done in JACOBS is we develop a process what we refer to as setup for success. And this is a standardized approach to how we set up the major programs. Programs typically between 1 billion euros and 50 billion euros is where we operate in the major programs, but similarly on our smaller projects, we adopt this approach. So the setup for success takes us through a standardized process. And as we see today, there are 20 programs globally going through the setup for success process. What that did for us, and we're learning from Jaguar, is about actually when you take all the best learnings from all these different projects around the world, these amazing iconic projects that we're fortunate to be involved with, you actually then start to take the little bit of nuggets into there. And without this sort of standardized approach, you're heavily reliant on individuals' capability. So operationalize it, takes all the best from all the people who've delivered projects, and then puts it into a process that we can deploy across the program. So that was one of the key learnings we've got. Why is it important, the operationalization? Because it gives you more predictability. It gives investors in these markets more confidence of the de-risking of their investment. Some of these investments are huge, huge commitments. And so where we're looking to de-risk their investment over the long term by giving predictable CapEx outturns is really important for them. The slide on the right is about the modularization. The thing I'm excited about the SMR market, particularly point of view, is the opportunities. And we've spent the last 5 years or so working with both developers and product suppliers in this field. The one here is from one of our advanced facilities. So we build the largest supply of data centers, pharmaceutical plants, microchipped, and we've been doing this predominantly from our operations out of Ireland, but also in Eastern Europe, about how we actually modularize and deliver this. Now, when I first went to Ireland and I asked them, do you have any example test sort of sales cases? And they were like, no. Okay, do you have any sort of sales literature I can use? No. I come to meet the right people here. And what they said was that, look, you don't tell people that you draw in AutoCAD anymore. The clients just accept that. In our sectors, in our industry, we've been doing this for 30 years. It's what we do, so they just expect it. So they don't make a big song and dance for it. In infrastructure and in the nuclear world, modern method of construction, modularization offsite is hot property and going forward. But in other industries, it's just a standard way of working for them. And the one thing I took away from it wasn't about systems and the integration of the supply chain and how they approach these things. It was actually a mindset. The engineers, when you really speak to them, have a real mindset of how to approach this, which is different to other engineers and how they approach. And that's something I just wanted to get across today about how the nuclear industry has such a great opportunity to learn from other industries rather than try and go through that process and learning again. The other advantage of this, we talk about supply chain. I've spoken to some of the suppliers here over the last day or so, is about the bottleneck in supply chain. The key advantage, particularly in the Eastern Europe markets, is about bringing the site to the location, not the project team to the site. The opportunities to build off-site and manufacture the supply chain is huge. We've been looking at building some of these facilities in deprived areas, particularly in the UK, to build up the workforce there and invest in local communities, which can then be transported to the site. We're no longer tied to the site and having 10,000 workers on the site itself. Those 10,000 workers are still required, but they're just not required on site. So there's great opportunities and mindset to be thinking more social side of things. The last slide for me was about the sort of efficiencies associated with this, which is also a challenge. So I did 5 years or so working in the water industry, which is really good because they're pretty small projects and you get 300 transfers at trying to get it right every 5 years. There's 300 programs. I was on the board of Crossrail, which is one of the 20 billion euro project. There's only one Crossrail going to be, and there was lessons there, but there's no another Crossrail. In the water sector, the plants are very similar. There's lots of them. You get lots of opportunity to repeat and improve on, and the modular reactors are the same here. So from taking in where we are now with the learning from the water sector, that in early engagement with developers and government to try and keep the standardization. People like to tweak, engineers, and I can say this because I'm a failed ex-engineer, that we like to engineer, we like to polish a little bit, a little 1% here. Stop it, put your pen down. It's about trying to keep that standardized approach. And the reason why, the benefits associated as you deploy more and more of these things, as you can see on the chart there, moving through economies of scale, true cost-based analysis of what does productivity really mean. Without a standard-based approach, you can't really measure the equitable sort of values of productivity. You end up applying the AI analytics and analysis of your schedules and what things should cost. And there's a lot of literature associated with that at this moment in time. So the benefits of actual production in the other sectors, in advanced facilities, they see 30 to 40% reduction in the cost base. That's possible because of some of the enablers that you've got by taking that standardized approach in there. So I'll hand over to Helen now and just just repeat about the lessons from the other sectors and what we can do in the nuclear industry to learn from them. So, off to you.
Thanks, James. So I'm now going to show you a few examples where we've done this in practice. So learning from our major infrastructure projects in the UK and being able to translate that into our wider nuclear programs. So the first one I've got as an example is actually where we've shown translation about development consent, getting that permissions, regulation, planning. And the two examples I've got here is the Lower Thames Crossing. As the integration partner for the Lower Thames Crossing, we were the designer, consulting on environment and the program management, and we put together one of the more difficult development consents. It took over 7 years, I think it was, to put that through. We had a huge team developing that. And there were a lot of lessons that we learned from that then got only recently the approval for the development consent in 2025. From those learnings, we've been able to apply and reapply to some of the work that's happening in the UK, both on the existing new build nuclear, which was at Wolver. Sadly, didn't go through. But here we put together again a team for the EIA with 19 different disciplines that led right across from land and marine, environmental issues and assessment, and put together one of the most complex development consent orders in the UK that we've ever seen. Fast forward on to current day, and actually we're going back to that material and been asked now with the new Great British Energy Nuclear SMR programme to look at that site again and actually start reworking that knowledge and skill set from our team to help again with that environmental assessment. So we've had 2 lessons learned and the knowledge exchange that's happened with that project. Another one working from Heathrow, where JACOBS was part of an integrated design team. It was oversaw the design activities, but as well looked at highways and earthworks. And it's really the earthworks bit that I just want to home in on there. There was a huge amount of planning. Something like 18 football fields were being planned to move material. A huge, colossal amount of material and very complex planning that had to go around that to ensure that Heathrow Airport, that we all know and have used, maintained and was kept open as well to add to the complication. Ironically, we've just started tiptoeing back into that programme of work, which has just been reinvigorated. But many of the lessons learned from that work have fed into work that's now ongoing in Sizewell. JACOBS are providing leadership on the groundworks and the earthworks, as well as providing geotechnical assurance for the Civil Works Alliance. And more recently for the planning for the geological disposal facility for nuclear waste services. Again, we're using the knowledge that we gained from work from Heathrow and work from Sizewell in some of the very early stage planning that's going into helping with the master planning, looking at high-level material movement. And that's helping to plan, deliver, and characterize the environments for the decision-making process that is going through at a very early stage of the environmental assessment and site evaluation. And then one of the final ones is actually showing development and adaptation of innovation. So we're going to Hinkley Point C, EDF project. JACOBS here have been designer of the UK's first qualified nuclear cooling tunnels at Hinkley Point C. They're just about nearly completed. They have some of the best photographs actually of tunnels I've seen, so we're very lucky to see a few of those. But it was a 5.5 miles of tunnels and associated structures. Parts of it were particularly complex, and through some of the innovative design and planning and efficiencies that was done while engineering actually, enabled a reliable reduction in the amount of carbon from the rebarring that was planned in some of the situations. These tunnels had to be very complicated. They have heat associated, so thick liners. So any amount of reduction in carbon is always an advantage, but also it helped reduce the time for the rebarring and the construction in reducing the program timescale, which was very much appreciated by the client. Those concepts and ideas are now being transported into Sizewell C. And the principles of the intelligent replication is something that we're trying to bring into that program. Hopefully learning more efficiencies and again doing some very innovative work and innovation and engineering. So they're just three little examples. We've got a number of other examples that James talked about, particularly strength and depth in bringing innovation and leading edge world science actually as well into some of the work we're doing for seismic hazard assessment for our new build nuclear fleet, as well as some of the existing fleets in the UK. So lots of work ongoing and lots of lessons to be learned and shared as well. Importantly, we do a lot of that and share it with our community, because one of the important things is we learn as an industry to actually move forward, and we help collaborate and partner to do that.
Okay, so just to sort of wrap up on our short presentation for you, is about, Helen touched about the approach to innovation and building in innovation. It's also a mindset, learning cultures in particular, in creating an environment to allow people to thrive and open to operate. That sometimes means things don't always work, and that's okay. In an industry that's wanting to push the boundaries, we're at the pivotal point, as you're probably aware, it's such an exciting time in the nuclear industry about where it's taken to, and the new, and from my perspective, the new sort of approach to whether it's the micro reactors or the small modular reactors or smaller or advanced reactors. This innovation and this learning from other industries is going to be key to the success. When you look at some of the scale and the numbers, we cannot deliver these projects and these products to the scale, that the ambitions that the product suppliers are wanting in the timescales. So we're going to have to do it differently. It's going to force us to do that. Those innovations that Helen and touched on, in particularly in the consenting, when we're having discussions with product suppliers, I'm less worried about your product. I'm more worried about getting it on the ground, and which is where Helen's area comes in.
Yay!
Prevalent. When we've studied in the past, when I was working in the water industry, to get the project onto site, there was 47 stakeholders. Once we were on site, there was 6 stakeholders. The challenge is trying to get the number of stakeholders into that. And some of those areas that we're doing it is about confidence, it's about capability, it's about experience, and all of those factors de-risk clients' investment. When I speak to investors, they're particularly worried on first of a kind, wanting to be out there, but ensuring that we have control and risk. Some of the areas that hopefully you've seen today, where we've learned from outside industry, whether it's the automotive or it's the water or it's advanced facilities, there are some great opportunities for us as a sector now to move forward and take them on board. So, you want to add anything else, Helen?
No. Just to say that we'll be around for a little bit and happy to take questions and any discussion. So, and if not, we're also on stand, now I've got to remember the number. Stand R149. So please come and talk to us. We'll be happy to help and share and have further discussions. So lovely to meet you all.
Thank you very much.